Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the guitarist and songwriter and artist. It is the one and only Steve Appleton, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Anyway, for those who do know or don't know, if you do know, don't worry about it. If you don't, he was in various Norwich bands, one being Basti from the 80s, and also another one called Globo, who went on to record various albums, which you'll find out more about during this interview, so I'm not going to give you any spoilers. No spoilers here. So look, after several minutes of chin chat, it is showbiz, that's what we do. That gets edited out because it's kind of boring and tedious. We got down to that very exciting subject that was the early formative years. What was that moment? Steve, tell us about your early formative years and the moment that triggered everything. Here goes. Take it away.
Definitely. So end of the pier, seeing Bert Weedon. It was the weirdest thing. So Bert Weedon, if people don't know, is the guy that wrote Play Guitar in a Day, all those kind of learn how to play guitar books, of which later I actually did have one. But I'm 6 years old. My father, for some reason, took us to see Bert Weedon. And he did this, he played some songs, whatever, and that was a bit boring, I suppose. But then he did this amazing thing where he said, look, I can play the guitar really fast. And I bet you can't count how many notes I play in a minute. And he did, you know, it was a real technical, I can see now, it's a real technical exercise just to fill time. But as a 6-year-old, it was astonishing, firstly, to see, and I mean this in a good way, a slightly elderly gentleman at that point, kind of really getting into playing the guitar. It was really excited by it. Yes. And then to see the audience really excited by it. Suddenly it was like, oh yeah, music, that could be a thing that I could become involved in.
Yeah. So did you grow up in the sort of Norfolk, basically?
Oh, absolutely. I was born in Kings Lynn. For a while I moved to Great Yarmouth, and then I moved to Norwich. I've moved all over Norfolk.
You have the sort of, yeah, you went to the high spots of the
highs and the lows.
The highs and the lows. So yes, as a 6-year-old then, you saw Bert Weedon. So were you sort of also watching things like Top of the Pops and listen to the Top 20 on a Sunday afternoon, evening?
So the Bert Weedon thing, for me, looking back on it, gave me permission to see the guitar as a cool thing. I mean this in a good way. If my dad took me to see it, and it was the only thing he ever took me to see at a theatre, it meant that the guitar was doable. Interestingly, then one of my cousins learned to play the guitar, and he looked like a cross. It was really weird. He looked like a cross between Freddie Mercury and Brian May. He had this really curly hair. So both Queen members. Yes. And he really liked Queen. So Bert Weedon gave me permission to think that playing the guitar was great because the audience loved you for it. My cousin gave me permission to think, actually, normal people can learn to play the guitar. That was shocking.
And have long hair.
Well, I couldn't manage it in those days, definitely. Yeah. Then my mum brought me my first ever single. So the first ever record I owned. It was by Slade. It was Goodbye to Jane. So quite rocking, again, very weird for my mum to decide to do that. But I had the 7-inch single of Slade's Goodbye to Jane.
Yeah, I bet you even played the B-side. So were your parents at all, interested in music? Was your dad, when he was a young teen, probably...
Oh, no. Dad, and I mean this in a good way, was a bricklayer. Very kind of working class, very manly. He did nothing but work.
Did he do national service?
No, he was a little bit too young for that.
Right.
But from my perspective, and this is really cruel, and children are like that, my dad had no interests apart from chain smoking and work. I mean, he provided for his family brilliantly, but he chain smoked and he worked, and he took me to see Burt Weedon.
Right. Was he into sport at all, or was that a no as well?
No, I don't think he was. My family so I grew up on a farm in just outside Kings Lynn, Tilney All Saints.
Yeah.
So I was surrounded by strawberries all the time.
Cows?
No, just strawberries.
Just strawberries.
I love strawberries so much. But so yeah, the idea that suddenly my mum had bought me a record, and she let me put it on the record player. We had one of those kind of big kind of cabinets.
Oh, we loved them, didn't we?
Record player in it, and if you put it in, and the arm would go over. And I don't know how old I was when that came out. It couldn't have been more than maybe 8. We can actually check the dates, I suppose.
Well, yes, absolutely. So so your parent, so your dad obviously not, but did you have any brothers or sisters at this stage?
Yes, I had an elder brother, and he was not interested in anything that wasn't. He was very sporty. He was a kind of championship hurdler for a while. Again, very manly. So by that I mean he was kind of he liked drinking. He liked going out and kind of being boisterous. I liked staying in, listening to records, reading books.
Right.
It's
kind of interesting because on my sort of way, my childhood, I suppose when my parents got married, again, they were sort of very working class from the countryside, and they were the generation that never sort of borrowed money, so they just sold everything. So we didn't have a record player in the house until the early 70s, where suddenly, Dad had sold his records and the record player, got married, got a little house together, and then, things started to appear in our lives during the late 60s and early 70s. Obviously, I don't remember much about the early 60s, but I don't, from the stories, we didn't have much, which is fine. But then, they got the record player, and they bought a couple of terrible records, which were really bad. But my brother, who was older, 7 years older than me, was a big influence, and he bought, I remember a couple of the albums he bought, which was probably about 73, was Sgt. Pepper, the Beatles, just in case you didn't know, and also Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and it was like, wow, that's unusual. And at that time, no one cared about the Beatles, did they? I mean, they were just passé, and we'd seen a few of the films, but there was no cultural context of this album, so I just played it constantly, going, interesting, this is very interesting lyrics, and then I think we also got another one which is hugely influential, which was the Carpenters, which I loved to this day. So, and I've always said, if you like the Carpenters, you're definitely going to love Joy Division and the Smiths for various reasons. So, so that was kind of our little world. So it was like suddenly seeing things like the glam world on Top of the Pops, and then Alice Cooper's Schools Out, which were quite influential.
Well, certainly for me then, once we'd got past that kind of very child period, listening to Slade was my very child period.
Yes.
Elder brother.
And Action Man, did you have an Action Man?
Oh, I had tons of Action Man. Guns. Well, we lived on a farm, so we had real guns as well.
Yeah.
Shotguns, air pistols. I wasn't that keen, to be honest.
Yes, we all had a gun.
No, my brother suddenly got into a kind of heavy metal. So I was listening to loads of Black Sabbath. So think moving from Slade to kind of heavy metal, to kind of Thin Lizzy. So he'd be listening to that stuff.
What about Deep Purple? Did they appear?
Oh, Deep Purple, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, my brother had Deep Purple and Black Sabbath were 2 albums that appeared as well.
They were in my head, but for me, I was listening to Joni Mitchell. So again, Martin, my brother, was very kind of manly and macho, and I was very kind of, well, if he's doing that, then I'll listen to singer-songwriters, I'll listen to emotional stuff. So our house actually had a really interesting kind of reverberation, all these kind of heavy metal riffs, which really came to the fore later on when I was in kind of heavy rock bands.
Yes.
And this kind of singer-songwriter, Joni Mitchell, who I absolutely still love to this day. Amazing work. It's interesting kind of what you pick up on.
Yes. Well,
from Joni Mitchell, I went straight to Kate Bush because I heard her on the bus going to the secondary school. Yeah, absolutely. And that was the first album that I bought.
What, the
Wuthering
Kick
Heights.
Inside?
Yes, yeah.
Nice.
And then I've got every album that she's ever released. I think she's amazing.
Yes,
Even the
absolutely.
stuff I don't like, I love. The fact that she's done it and she's got this kind of voice and she's got this persona.
Yeah, no, I sort of think The Sensual World is one of the side two is just stunning, really. But interesting, just going back to my brother, he went into the prog rock world of Yes, Genesis, Wishbone Ash, Barclay James Harvest, and the solo work of Rick Wakeman, and that was a huge influence on my life for about 3 years, which is quite odd, really, because
So I went to the grammar school in King's Lynn. There was a whole bunch of people there who were incredibly influential on me. So as a kind of 13, 14-year-old, yeah, I was introduced to Yes and Genesis. And so that was huge. Yes. And Steve Howe, the guitarist from Yes, was enormous for me.
yes, we loved Going for the One, Don't Kill the Whale. I mean, they were just
Absolutely.
classics.
Why would you kill them?
I know.
Friendly to the whales.
Yes,
They've done
absolutely. It's up there with the protest song of the Osmonds and Crazy Horses, really, isn't it? Really, I didn't sort of.
Sorry, I have to. So on the farm there was me, my elder brother, and my cousin Carol. She lived in the house next door with her mum. So we were incredibly tight knit family, and she adored the Osmonds. So I was doing Joni Mitchell. My brother was doing kind of Thin Lizzy and Black Sabbath, and Carol was doing the Bay City Rollers and the Osmonds.
Classic. What about the Bay City Rollers? Oh, fantastic. We wouldn't have punk if it wasn't for the Bay City Rollers. Anyway, let's face it, they were just everything.
Permission to wear weird trousers. I think they gave us. We didn't have to like them, but they gave us permission.
And they did that chant, "Hey ho, let's go!" And then you see the Ramones did it. You know, they just copied them.
Yeah. Good days. Good days.
Good day. Great songs. But yeah, so you'd picked up a guitar by then, and did it come quite naturally, sort of learning?
Not at all. So my story was seeing Burt Whedon at 6 made it exciting. I got a acoustic guitar. My nan ran one of those catalogues.
Nice, great Universal.
Yes, absolutely. So you could buy stuff from that. So I bought, as like I think I must have been 7, an acoustic Spanish nylon string guitar.
Oh,
and it really hurt. I don't know if you've ever played a rubbish acoustic
I did.
nylon. They really hurt. So I put it in the cupboard and forgot all about it. But then I saw my cousin Dave, the one who looks like Brian May and blah, 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 Freddie Mercury. He had an electric guitar, Stratocaster. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then I forgot all about it. Then I went to, so that was when I was kind of 13, 14. Then my friend at the time, Daniel, so we're 17 at this point. I really haven't done much at all.
No.
17.
But you would have done your GCSEs or O levels, wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, I've done those. We're now thinking about A levels. I did art and archaeology. That's all I'm doing. My friend Daniel Stabler's father was a huge blues fan. He had a room full of blues records. I wasn't that interested, but Daniel said we should play guitar. We should learn to do it. I think he wanted to impress his dad.
Right.
So because it was, and this will come across a lot actually in my certainly early career, because somebody suggested it, I said, yeah, right. Because being really cruel, it was easier to sit around learning to play the guitar than to think of things to talk about.
Nice. Yes, no.
Yeah. So it was kind of just an easy thing to do. So suddenly I kind of knew what the guitar was, and then suddenly I had a guitar and a friend who was keen to learn, and he had one of the Burt Whedon books, so we literally in a day learned some chords.
Oh my God, that's fantastic.
Then that all stopped because I went to art college in Great Yarmouth.
Oh, classic. Did you
meet? I'm like 18, not guitar, but I can kind of play a few chords. And this is the real kicker. I started at Great Yarmouth. I lived in a bed and breakfast for 2 years with a guy called Paul Thompson, who's become my kind of musical and business partner ever since. So the last kind of 30, 40 years, I've worked with this guy. He was a punk rock band. And so he was a musician, he and stuff. I was a kind of little guy that was kind of in the same room as him. He suddenly was recording a demo with his punk rock band, and he said, well, you can play guitar a bit, can't you? And I was too embarrassed to say, well, not really. I'm sorry, Paul. So I said, yeah, I'll give it a go. And literally that was it. Suddenly I was kind of in a band, in a recording studio, kind of, oh God, and you can do it. It's really weird. You don't have to be Steve Howe. You don't have to play in Yes to actually play guitar. You just have to make some noise with it.
Nice. That's amazing.
That
So
was shocking.
so was this a band that had a name?
Yes. So that band was called Eva Valve. They came from Wyndham College, and they were a kind of very punk band. When I saw them in Yarmouth, they'd become very, well, he had a black hand painted on his face. So they'd become very interested in the kind of look, and he had this kind of curly quiff. I was stunned by this.
Was this like the Flock of Seagulls, but more gothic?
Yes. Yeah, there was a real kind of dressy-uppy element to it.
They loved that in the 80s, didn't they? Was it
Oh,
slightly, was there, so was this being the early 80s? I mean, obviously 79 Thatcher gets in, which, changes the political landscape a bit. And then there was kind of the rise of sort of the new romantic period, wasn't there, at that period, at that time? And also there was the sort of the goth world of the Batcave and Alien Sex Fiend and people like that. So was that kind of scene started to sort of slip into the world that is the art school days of Yarmouth?
Yes, bearing in mind we're in Great Yarmouth. So we were very happy to kind of dress up and put face paint on, or Paul was, shall I say, and I was there to support him. But the audience, I think, were expecting Black Sabbath. So, yeah, there was an interesting tension. Nobody was nasty, but they were, I think they were thinking, oh, art students. And then they would wander off, if that makes sense. But that really didn't matter. The point is, we were in a band called Eva Valve. This is where it gets really interesting. We did some quite good recordings. We started to tour a bit, and then two things happened. Firstly, I don't know if you know the Waterfront in Norwich.
Yes.
So the Waterfront was started by just a bunch of kids who started a thing called the Venue Campaign. It was a campaign to get a venue in Norwich where rock could happen.
Yes.
So we became part of the Venue Campaign, and Eva Valve was kind of touring around little schools, doing performances and saying to the kids, you need a rock venue.
My God, are you like one of those theatre companies that used to, well, theatre people that would come to schools and do sort of weird little things?
Yes, we'd do 2 or 3 songs, and one of them, I remember one of the highlights of that for me, it was Christmas time, and they asked us to do a cover of Slade's Come On Feel the Noise, and then Here It Is, Merry Christmas. So we're doing like an assembly, kind of playing these Slade songs. It's gone right back to when I'm 7 again.
My God, this is like Legs Akimbo, isn't it?
Yeah, you kind of go around and you do stuff. So this was it. Firstly, from the Waterfront's point of view, we became quite involved in that, and I would say I'm the first person to ever play at the Waterfront.
There you go.
Just throw that out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm also the first local act to headline at the Waterfront. That was quite exciting.
Well, yeah. So yeah, those days are the 80s.
But no, here's the real kicker though. So we're Eva Valve, a kind of quirky pop band at that point. Also part of the Venue Campaign was a band called the Herman, who were, from my perspective, very outre. They were kind of a bit heavy. They were kind of a bit jazz. We were a trio. They were a trio. We all needed somewhere to live, so we moved into the same bungalow.
A bungalow? God, that's so perfect.
Oh, it was perfect. It was a bungalow with a huge garage separate from the building that we turned into a rehearsal room. And then suddenly we said, well, if we're 2 3-piece bands, why don't we just do a gig as a 7-piece band? Just join them together, write some songs. And that's where Basti came from.
Right. God.
The
dynamic of 7 people in the band. What could go wrong?
Oh, it was amazing. All living in the one tiny bungalow. So that was 1987. So,
oh wow! So the 80s really did. So you were at college between the years of 16 to 18.
No, 17 to 19. I was a little bit younger in the year.
Right.
So yeah, I was 17 to 19. By the time I was 19, I'd moved to Norwich, and we were in these bands. Within 6 months, we'd become this big rock band. So suddenly I wasn't playing kind of English guitar anymore. We were very influenced by the industrial rock scene in America. That was how I remember it anyway. So
Yes.
It was very loud, very angry, very, I think very annoyed with the music scene at the time. We wanted it to be a little bit more kind of vigorous, I think. We were young men, we wanted vigor.
You wanted bigger, but yeah. But then that, you know, the 80s was kind of fascinating because I didn't realize there were kind of so many little sub scenes and stuff like that once you start picking it through. But you know, you had the mainstream charts with that Trevor Horn production. Then on the other side, we had, you know, the indie world of the Smiths, who were between the years of 83 to 87, which was kind of quite major because there seemed to be a real scene at that point with people like the June Brides and Go-Betweens and the Triffids, and then the whole cassette with Bogshed and Big Flame and all those other bands. And, you know, obviously in America, there was the sort of the rise of people like Bad Brains and then Husker Du and Butthole Surfers and Big Black. So where were you kind of getting your influences from? Because it obviously wasn't from sort of cute indie pop kids.
Oh God, no! Like I say, very much we were kind of angry West Coast of America. So just at that point, grunge was kind of starting to happen. So from my perspective, we were never a grunge band, but suddenly there were interesting guitar sounds, and it was kind of sweet. Also, brilliantly for me, at that point, Basti was quite big. So we toured everywhere in England. We literally played everywhere. Just at that point, we had the same promotion company as Nirvana. And they were touring.
God, who was that? Was that Bad Moon?
Bad Moon. Yeah, I keep
Anton.
but that's from the Doctor Who series, isn't it? So yeah, we stayed in Anton's house with Nirvana. So you kind of chatting, you're kind of soaking these influences. It was brilliant.
I think he also did the Orbs first 12-inch, didn't he?
I think he did, yes.
I think there was.
There was a kind of little London scene that we poked. I don't think we were ever a part of it, but we could stay in houses if we needed to, if that makes sense. And we were kind of all tour. The other thing that was really big for us, so being slightly part of that, what I think of as that very at the time modern scene, we also bought a sampler. So Paul, the guy that I moved into the art school bed and breakfast with, he bought a sampler. So suddenly we went from being a kind of rock band to being a rock band that was interested in kind of electronics stuff. So Basti was brilliant, totally enjoyed it. We did some amazing stuff. We released a couple of albums, loads of singles, toured everywhere. Then we lost a couple of members. So moving towards the late 80s, 88, 89. We played with some amazing people as well.
Yes. Well, it was an interesting period because kind of after 87, they did feel like, you know, having interviewed a lot of those bands, most bands have a 5-year narrative, as we'll realise later. But, you know, they went, oh, actually, no one cares. And we've also, you know, we don't like each other and we've fallen out and we've got no money. So there's no point staying together, like a bad marriage. So then 87 comes along and then 88. And there's definitely the next wave of the 16 to 18-year-olds want their sound and their bands and no longer interested in those boring bands from the early 80s. And Ecstasy hit. So you get that kind of the next bit of kind of the rave scene with Primal.
I am totally there. So following that, we had like 3, 4, 5 years of Basti, which was amazing. We did some really, looking back, brilliant work. We had the bad marriage, we fell apart. 4 members of Basti, so 3 of the original Eva Valve and 1 of the other band, decided to become, because we had this kind of sampling technology and we'd started to get electronic computery stuff. Yeah, suddenly we were part of the rave scene. We became a band called Globo.
Globo, blimey
Yeah.
O'Reilly. So were you, I mean, when you were talking about the North London scene, there was people like, My Bloody Valentine, Silverfish, the Faith Healers, and then Carter, the Unstoppable Sex Machine.
We
So
had the same
they were
managers.
kind of a grungy, they were quite a grungy, squatty old bunch, weren't they? You weren't a squatty, grungy old bunch, were you? You were in a
No, I'm
bungalow.
whispering. That was awful. I hated all that stuff.
Did you?
Nice, clean house. That was why I was really pleased that we could kind of dip our toes into it.
And go back to your
we had the
bungalow.
same managers as Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine. So we never actually worked with them, but we kind of met up with them loads. No, I was... One of the good things about living in a little provincial town, Norwich, it could be nice and clean, but you can pretend you're part of the London scene.
Yes, you can pretend you're CBGB's Max's Kansas City.
Exactly. But so then in my head, and this is just in my head, maybe it's different for other members of the band, but then we just, pretended we were part of the rave scene. Oh, no, actually, no, sorry, going back slightly. We also, as Basti, did loads of recording in Salford. In Peter Hook's studio. So we were also part of the Manchester scene, kind of.
Yes.
He took us to his mum's Indian restaurant for meals when we were up there. Lovely.
That's nice. So did you get frustrated though? Because obviously you recorded a couple of albums and a lot of material, but it didn't quite enter that kind of the next stage, did it?
Yeah, no, we got some lovely press. We worked with some lovely people. We made a little bit of money, but essentially nothing happened. The best that happened, and this for me was enormous, given I've mentioned my love of Joni Mitchell, there was a period where Geffen sent over their head PR person to kind of see a show that we did, with the idea that maybe we could sign with them. And she came and she saw us and she said, "Oh no, thank you." And that was the closest we ever came to. And in retrospect, it was such a blessing that we didn't kind of do that, because we'd have been stuck at that period, I think.
Yes. Were you influenced by people like Age of Chance by any chance? Were they on your radar?
Not really. No, I think by that point we'd kind of given up, or I had given up on other people. And I was trying to force Basti to become a thing. And when it, like my thing, and when it wouldn't, then we moved into the electronic dance scene, which, again, given that I really didn't like any of that, I don't like dancing, I'm not very good at it. I certainly didn't take any drugs, I'm not good at that. But as a kind of technical form, as an exercise to use that technology to make music, it was more the technology that was an influence for me by this point.
Yes. And with Basti, did you have a moment that you all sat down and said, to quote Jim Morrison, "This is the end," or did you just stop going to rehearsals?
Oh, so we did, those Sound City events?
Oh my God, yes, I'd forgot about them as well.
Yeah, no, we that's where we did a huge headline show at the Waterfront. They brought us champagne in, it was lovely. Live on Radio 1, did the big set. It was really quite nice. Literally the morning after, 3 members of the band said, "We've had enough of this."
Did you know it was coming? Did you have that feeling that the marriage was about to crumble?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised, but it felt kind of, at the time it felt a bit weird. Now it was such the right decision. I would have carried on, I think. But then Basti finished, we had this huge new life as kind of dance artists. Yeah. Signed to Hydrogen Jukebox, put out a whole bunch of albums, again worked with some amazing people.
So is it the case that you've managed to archive all your Basti kind of work? Yes.
Well, I'm literally at the moment I'm going through this process because, like you say, lots of people are interested in. Yeah. It's like their childhood. Brilliantly for me, I've always been pretty interested in technology, as I say. So I like to video things. I like to record things. I'm very good at archiving things. So I went in my loft a couple of weeks ago, and suddenly I could reach over, pull out the camera and all the DV tapes, and
Oh my God, that must be so exciting.
Oh, well, so I've literally today posted on my blog video of an entire show we did in Basti when we did a big tour of Poland. So there's an entire 50-minute show that we played in the University of Warsaw. And I haven't seen it for like 30 years. Wow, suddenly I've got this cassette. Wow, suddenly I can get it on this old computer behind me. That means I can put it on YouTube and share it.
Absolutely. No, I mean, we love it. Because a lot of people often say, about any regrets. Mostly it's just, oh, I wished I'd taken some more pictures. I wished I'd, basically taking more pictures. That was the main one. And enjoy it more. That was often people's their sort of thing. So had Basti just become a very angsty thing? Because it was quite a big collective of people. And then you had lots of guest artists, didn't you?
Yeah. Basti it became, I think, and again, this is my perspective, we were young and we were angry and we were fighting against a whole bunch of stuff. And then suddenly we weren't quite so young. And maybe, there's an energy, as we know, to anger. There's an energy to youth. But suddenly as you're starting to, I'm in my kind of late 20s now, maybe I'm not so angry.
Yeah.
I'm actually living in the house that I live in now, and it's in lovely kind of the Golden Triangle in Norwich. What have I got to be angry about? It's stupid.
The great G&T, the muesli belt.
One starts to become a little bit more happy.
You go to Habitat, don't you?
Yeah, well, that's what Globo was, actually.
What Habitat?
The whole dance scene for I guess for the, I'm saying this in air quotes, the dance scene for the kids that were involved in it was maybe kind of a bit angsty and outre and dangerous. For me, it was just happy and lovely.
Yes. Well, we heard, the ever pulsating thing, which went on for ages, didn't it? John Peel, I remember John Peel playing it and being very sort of amazed by it. And there was also that Chicago house scene and on FFRR records, and suddenly all this kind of other exciting kind of, I suppose, acid house had happened, hadn't it?
Yeah.
But there was all that going on. So the rave scene was absolutely huge at that stage, wasn't it?
Yeah, and we did some really quite amazing shows. We'd take over buildings, we'd kind of do DJ sets and kind of wander in and play Globo sets. It was very kind of lovely and amorphous. And I just remembering having having a great time doing those shows. And we did projections and lovely pictures, and it was so lovely.
So when you came to your first album, which was it 95, pro-war, by then the music scene had changed again, because there was that stage where it was all about Seattle and the grunge scene, and it was all very kind of get us kind of sort of hairy people talking, with Jack Daniels in their hand and talking about their problems with their stepfather and angst about small town America. And then we got bored of that, and no one cared about the Nirvana's third album, really, did they? And
let's get over it, man.
Get over it, yeah, just move on. And then Britpop comes. So where were you feeling, at that stage? Because we had Censor, everyone loved Censor, and everyone had loved the Levelers. A bit strange about the Levelers. But yes, and then people like Chumbawamba started sort of getting into that dance fusion. So were you kind of looking around thinking, not trying to sort of make something commercial, but thinking, we shouldn't be Simon and Garfunkel. The kids want something a bit more dynamic here.
Well, no, I think we then moved to an interesting period. So we had been this very happy kind of dance band that were putting on these events, and that was all great. And then suddenly, again, we got that little bit older. Yes. And leaving the house that's not so happy. I can stay in the house and do stuff. So suddenly it became a slightly different focus, and you were thinking about, okay, if we make this piece of music, we could place it with this TV series. So it was all about kind of syncing your material.
Right.
Which doesn't sound as kind of, I don't know, it's not as romantic.
No, it's not cutting edge, is it?
No, not at all. So we did some title sequences and theme tunes for some BBC comedy shows. So we were working at that point. Suddenly it went from not being in a band, but to being working musicians. And there's a real difference there. So we were producing loads of material, and mostly that material was, I'm kind of waving my arm dismissively. It was used on kind of websites.
Right. God.
And then it disappeared as soon as websites disappeared. You know, it wasn't songs, and it wasn't important, but there was definitely money involved in it.
Had you been slightly influenced by Zig Zig Sputnik by any chance? Had you sort of enjoyed their kind of brash kind of outrageousness?
I know members of Globo and I know that I wasn't impressed by that. But definitely there was a commercialization to that, a kind of capitalism that kind of I think we did become interested in. Either commenting on, so some of our songs were quite kind of political and kind of questioning the value of lots of things, including our own chosen career path. Because, if you're trying to make money, maybe you make this kind of music. And suddenly, it went a bit weird at that point. It certainly, for me, wasn't as much fun. But we did produce maybe more useful material. If we sold a tractor, that was useful. I'm not selling that period too well. We did theme tunes for the Norwich City Football Club to sell more shirts.
Right. God, you had I mean, so you were looking at music more of like, we're not...
Content.
We want content. You want content.
Yeah. It was. We really did move into the kind of late 90s, just making content that could be used in the marketplace.
Right, blimey. So because when you were sort of obviously Basti, that was the Thatcher years, and then most of Globo was kind of the John Major years coming into Tony Blair's new Labour, really, wasn't it? So you sort of caught the wave of, no, to hell with politics, we're just going to make loads of money.
Yeah, kind of. I would also go back, to the Thatcher years. There were many bad things about it. But one brilliant thing, do you remember there was a program called the Manpower Services Commission? Essentially, there was an advert that came out. It was in the local post office. I went in to get my dole check.
Yes.
As an unemployed musician. There's a big poster that said, "Are you an unemployed musician? If so, do you want to come on this Manpower Services Commission funded project? We'll give you," I think it was like 50 quid a week, which was slightly more than the dole at that point.
Yeah.
And you sign up for it, and if you're taken on, oh my God, you get a whole year. Well, I got nearly 2 years training being a community musician. I don't know if you have any opinion on that.
All those kind of schemes, because I know of a lot of bands from the 80s, during the early 80s, you know, there was unemployment, but there was also job seekers allowance and enterprise loan schemes. Yeah. So a lot of people just had to sort of magically get £1,000 in their bank account, which was always quite amusing. And then, you know, there you go, have a 1 year and put anything you want, just don't worry.
Well, here's the thing. Firstly, and I'm not boasting, I've always been lucky and quite focused in, if there's money available, then I will get it. So if there was a bunch of money to pay for a whole year for you to sit in a room with a bunch of other musicians and become a community musician, then I'm going to damn do it.
Yes, absolutely.
But now here's the thing. This is so important. Margaret Thatcher's government paid for me to do this amazing training. The thing that I signed up to was essentially run by a guy called John Stevens. He's he was, he's passed on now, a free jazz drummer. He started the London improvised music ensemble. So weirdly, at the same time I was in Basti and a kind of angry rock, grungy kind of kid, I was working with all these amazing free jazz players. I actually played with Derek Bailey, who's an insanely good improvising guitar, or was an insanely good improvising guitarist. So at the same time I was doing kind of all these rock riffs, I was getting this amazing training in free jazz.
Free jazz. My God, we love free jazz.
Well, no, we'll come back to that because that's what I am now. So not only did I get this amazing training, I got to play in a bunch of orchestras, kind of makey-uppy, plinky-plonky type things. I then had an entire career separate from being an angry rock musician. I was teaching. I was going into initially kind of hospitals and schools and special schools, encouraging people to make music. How brilliant's that?
Yes. And there's quite a few musicians I spoke to
it was a weird time. It was kind of awful, but it was also brilliant. I'm also going to say, and this is kind of weird, because I was an unemployed musician who was then trained to run music sessions, so Globo kind of stopped, it became, it almost felt a bit weird to keep going.
Was after the album Pro-War?
I think we did a couple more albums after that. Oh, we'll come back to Pro-War as well. But we did a couple of albums after that, but suddenly it kind of ground to a halt. But oh my God, we've got this whole studio full of computers at that point. Oh my God, what are we going to do with all that stuff? Suddenly, bang, I became a designer. Because Paul, who was a punk rocker and made me join his punk rock band, said, let's be designers.
My God, were you influenced by Barney Bubbles?
I was actually, but no. This is the big deal. So me and Paul became a design company. This was in like 92 probably, and it was at that weird period where you could say, "Okay, I'm a design company," and suddenly you were.
Right, blimey! It's like going on one of those Tony Robbins kind of.
Oh yeah. You just said
actualization moments.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. I said because I'm the sensible one, I think, of the two of us. I said, okay, we'll take a year because we could. We'll take a year out. We'll figure out what it means to be a designer. And the very next day after I'd said that, we got our first proper job. Oh my God! So suddenly we're proper designers.
Wow, that's amazing.
But here's the really weird thing: because I was a community musician, happy talking to groups of people about making music. Bang, I'm suddenly a designer, happy talking to groups of people, which include kind of council design departments, kind of companies. I'm talking to them, I'm teaching sessions in digital imaging, in kind of design. So obviously at the time I become a web designer. Because you've got all this technology in your recording studio that you're not using to record anymore, suddenly of course you're a filmmaker. Why would you not be? That stuff can do film as well as it can do albums.
Yes, I know.
So it's a very strange career path, that's for sure. So when people ask me what I do, it's kind of complex. If you're this person, I'm actually an illustrator. My job is to draw pictures now, and I'm extraordinarily good at that. If you're somebody else, my job is I'm a free jazz guitarist and I'll do performances at your exhibition launch.
Excellent. This is good. So with that, had the band sort of just gone onto the back burner, so to speak?
I think we were always kind of making stuff. It felt at the time that we kind of lost our way slightly. But now I'm listening back and looking back at old videos. I've got this list of kind of 14 or 15 projects that we did, and I'm listening to the stuff, and it's really good. But I'm not blowing smoke up me or anything. I'm listening to it, and I'm thinking, God, that was good. And it doesn't matter to me that nobody really heard it. We just got a bit bored, and then we moved on to the next thing. And then we get bored of that and move on to the next thing.
So does that mean that the 4 people of the band are still vaguely part of it?
We kind of slimmed down to just 3 people. So now there's me, there's Paul, who were Eva Valve, and then there's Mark Wernham, who was Herman Hurd. We've all had kind of loads of separate careers since. Mark... no, I won't tell you about Mark. He can tell you himself. But he's a big publisher now. He also used to work for the NME. He was He was the dance journalist at the NME. He did all that kind of stuff.
My God,
Going back to the name of the podcast, obviously.
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, we still work together. We still are Globo. We've just, a few months ago, heard, again, talking about that clock going round.
Yes.
Pro War, the first album, is about to be re-released on double vinyl gatefold with die-cut sleeve. Really fancy marketing strategy behind it all. Totally ruined by Brexit. I don't know if you know, if you're trying to press vinyl.
Yes,
it's all gone.
It's all gone. Yes, I know. Because there's a few independent labels that I'm sort of in touch with, and they've just gone, everything's just kind of been put back another 6 months and another 6 months.
So this re-release of Pro War was supposed to happen in September, so in like a week or so.
Yes.
Now it's kind of gone back, I think, to next year maybe, literally just because we have no access to the physical gooey vinyl stuff. But no, I'm super excited about that.
So who's putting that out?
So that was the period we were signed to Hydrogen Jukebox, the record label. They did some amazing work. If you're listening, it's well worth going to their website and looking at their back catalogue. That's Hydrogen Duke, which is DUKE box. Took me ages to figure that out. It's probably clever, but
yes.
Hydrogen Jukebox. He again, I think the same thing, in the same way that I'm looking back at my back catalogue, and that's kind of bands I was in. I think Doug, the owner of Hydrogen Jukebox, is looking at his back catalogue and thinking, yeah, it's good, I should put it out again. Maybe there'll be interest.
Or sell it to Cherry Red Records.
Yeah. I
don't know. I think it was a guy from, a label that I spoke to, and I think he just got an offer, and he said, yeah, you can just have it. There you go. That's my pension plan.
Yeah,
so
we're old. We need pension. We need help.
It's like, yes, I do. He doesn't want to look after it, and Cherry Red Records are good. So so that's all going to be coming out by that label. Yeah.
And we're super excited by that. We probably won't tour it. That's all I'm saying. But there is going to be, apparently there's going to be a whole bunch of kind of interviews, a whole bunch of stuff going on around that.
On Pro War? Yes.
And I think the title might have changed. I'm not actually sure. I've seen the artwork for it, and it looks really pretty.
So it's going to be different to this one, which is what came out in 1995?
So Doug, I think, has done a lot of work on the audio of it. That's kind of tweaking the quality, tweaking the... I must admit, I haven't compared it to the original one, and I probably haven't listened to the original one since 1996.
Yes. So what gave you the kind of excitement to do... This was 2008. You did this Nation's Saving Grace. What was the sort of idea for that one?
Well, actually, that came about. So Globo was kind of working on a bunch of stuff. And then we got... Sorry, that was my email coming through.
Yes.
Globo was working on a bunch of stuff. And then we'd get bored and move on to another bunch of stuff. On Hydrogen Jukebox, so we were still kind of signed to them passively. We weren't releasing anything, but, once you've signed a contract, you're still friends with those people. So at least you talk to them.
Yeah.
Doug, Hydrogen Jukebox guy, said, "Oh, look, I'm releasing these little compilations of cover versions." So Mark, the other guy in Globo, is a huge Devo fan. So when Doug was doing a bunch of covers of Devo songs, he said, "Yeah, we'll do The Day My Baby Gave Me a Surprise." We did a cover of that, and it was released on this kind of single. Brilliant. It was the first time we'd ever done a cover since the Venue Campaign days when we did the Slade songs at that school. So first cover we'd ever done. And it was just great fun. And actually, Mark knows Mark Mothersbaugh, the Devo guy. So we had kind of long talks with them, and we actually did an exhibition of his work, because he makes loads of artwork, Mark Mothersbaugh. So came to the Norwich Arts Centre. We kind of had all his artwork on the walls. Globo did a little kind of 20-minute show, a few covers, a few original things. It was brilliant. But suddenly, we became known as kind of a covers band, and people were asking us to do kind of covers of their stuff, which was not what we expected or wanted particularly.
No.
But suddenly, for no reason at all, Paul said, well, why don't we do a cover of not a song, but an entire album? And if we were going to do a cover of an entire album, this is the album I'd like to do. Now, this is going to sound awful, but I've never listened to The Fall. I'm not interested in them. But he is, and I'm easily suggestible.
Excellent, yes.
So suddenly we spent probably 9 months working with a whole bunch of people, kind of local musicians, vocalists. It was brilliant. We covered the entire album, This Nation's Saving Grace. It was released on, that was Co-Muse, a little local record label, I think. The album's brilliant. We performed it once at the Norwich Arts Centre. So it was a live show. It was amazing. This is really interesting because it was filmed. A whole documentary was made about the process of recording that album. So I need to digitise all that, and then I'll put that up on my blog and stuff, and you can see it all for free.
Blimey, that's fantastic. So how did you come across, or not come across, but why did you pick certain people to be part of that album? Were they people that you just thought would suit those songs, like Spoiled?
No, as far as I remember, they're all people that we knew, and most of them, I'm going to say all of them, had been through the same community music training.
Right.
So we'd known them for a very long time. They also happened to be incredibly talented local musicians who committed for no money at all to record, to come in and perform, to be available, to be part of the filming of this documentary that was following us around. It was really generous of them. And I think, well, I definitely hope everybody had a brilliant time doing it.
Yes, absolutely. And did you grow to enjoy the work of Marky Smith at the end of that?
No. Well, one of the cool things about it is our album is not the Fall album. Obviously, it's completely different. It's got a kind of dance feel. At that point, I'm starting to bring in loads of my Derek Bailey influence, so kind of free jazz. I'm playing this broken guitar, acoustic guitar. It sounds brilliant. The lovely thing about that as a project, we finished it off. So we did this performance. We have the kind of documentary of it. We were invited to take it to Salford University, which is obviously where Marky Smith is from, Salford. They were doing a 2-day conference on the lyrics and the value of the lyrics of Marky Smith. So we went and did this kind of presentation of our project. And it was fantastic. His mum and sister were there in the audience. And so we got to meet Marky Smith's mum.
Blimey, that's worth a selfie.
Yeah, we went to the pub with them afterwards. Nobody got hit. It was lovely.
Oh my God, that's a fantastic project. So how did you then sort of think, what do we do next after this? Or did you just all go back to your day jobs?
Well, we're constantly doing our day jobs. We're constantly trying to kind of do stuff. So holding that thought, this is probably my last anecdote. So at this point, I'm kind of 50. I'm a 50-year-old man.
Yes. You're going to buy Lycra, aren't you? No, you're not going Lycra.
No. I'm a 50-year-old man who suddenly decided, well, my kids have grown up. I own my house. I don't really need to work. My wife said, why don't you go back to school? Because I'd never really had a proper education. So as a 50-year-old man, I decided to go to university. Brilliant. Because I have been a designer and I've done kind of loads of stuff, I went to the Norwich University of the Arts. I did the illustration course. Because I'm me, I got all the funding available. I mean, I really am lucky. Yeah, it might not be good for young people to go to university, but for old people, wow, it's good.
Excellent.
Because it was good for me, I persuaded all my friends to do the same thing. So there was loads of 50-year-old blokes.
God, you could get a student discount at Topshop. That's
Oh, you get so much as an older
Pizza
person.
Hut.
There were a whole bunch of bursaries available. They just gave me 3,000 quid for no reason at all,
Nice.
just because I was old. I'll
Old
take
and-
that, I say.
Yeah, play the pity card. That's good.
Well, I was hobbling at that point. Give me the
Yeah,
money.
right.
Hobbling. So I did 3 years of just being an illustration student at Newer, and I enjoyed it so much. I learned loads of great stuff. I made loads of work. I enjoyed it so much, I went on to do an MA in communication design, which could have been a bit weird. Communication design is often seen as typography.
Right.
Not a typographer. I find that stuff horrendous. I mean, it's brilliant that people do it, but it's not my interest. Brilliantly, the kind of main guy on that course, the very first project we did, I kind of did some drawing, and I took in a soundtrack that I'd made for the drawing. And I played it, and he said, yeah, the drawing's fine, but this music is magnificent. You spent the whole year making an album. I'll buy that album, he said. So suddenly the whole MA was taken up with looking at my musical practice.
So this is your solo work now?
Yes. So here's the thing. Suddenly, I'm still in Globo, and we're still kind of doing little projects that kind of either we're happy with or we're not. We're constantly developing stuff. But at the end of the MA, I'd set myself this little random task to produce 2 books, that's kind of drawn or written books, and 3 albums every year. I thought, I need this kind of prompt. If I don't make 3 albums and 2 books a year, I'll be disappointed. Because I didn't know how quickly I bloody work. Sorry, I swore. Cut that bit out.
That's all right.
I didn't realise how quickly I produce work. Normally, when I'm working in a group or an orchestra, my role is to interpret somebody else's kind of story or narrative. God almighty, if I work on my own, well, since I finished the MA, I finished that in 2018. So in the 2.5 years since then, I've produced 96 albums.
Nice. My God.
That's averaging 1.5 albums a week.
Oh.
Each album is at least 10 tracks or half an hour's music.
Yeah. Well, just on that point, because I did an interview with, I think he was a member of the band Half Japanese a couple of months ago, and I think he's doing an album a day. I think for
it's totally doable.
And artwork as well. He's just throwing the whole lot at
I do all the artwork, all the typography.
He doesn't.
I film. Going back to what we were saying, I also, if you go to my blog, hi, my name's Steve Appleton. If you go to my blog, you can see the film of me making every track of those solo albums.
There's a lot of. This is on Bandcamp, isn't it?
The solo albums are on Bandcamp. You can listen to them there. They're fantastic. So, I mean, some of the stuff is genuinely heartbreakingly good. My point is, following the MA, I've always liked what I've done, but following the MA, I genuinely feel I've become the musician that I should be. I love the work that I'm producing. And I love the fact that I'm producing work that I love, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we all know.
I'm not making music now to sell a tractor or a football T-shirt.
No, definitely.
I'm making stuff that I love. And I love the fact I was contacted by the British Library. So all those solo albums, they asked me if they could have them. So they're all held in the British Library, the National Sound Archive. If you go to the catalogue of the National Sound Archive and type in Steve Appleton, I've got the most entries of anyone ever. I think there are 980 now, because every track counts as an item.
Right.
In the catalogue. I've done 96 albums and some of my previous stuff as well.
I'm amazed you just didn't do another 4 just to get to the 100. Actually,
well, no, they're coming. I'm halfway. No, I'm 6 tracks into the next one. So,
Oh,
you know,
good.
and I had to work this morning, so I haven't produced a track this morning at all. It's a
Oh,
night.
God. I know you've got till midnight anyway. But yeah, so then, I mean, obviously that must be much more fun than anything you've ever done in your life, really, because it's your bit, isn't it, and your baby, and you don't have to have a conversation. Well,
Yeah,
just with
it's
yourself.
really interesting. I felt that I was a really, really good team player. So I've never written a song. I've never generated concepts. I talk to people that do write songs and concepts, and I try and help them with it, whether that's in an orchestral setting or, you know, as an illustrator, generally speaking, people would give you a text and you draw pictures for that text. Suddenly the fact that I'm doing the things that I love, genuinely I love drawing pictures, but I'm only drawing them for me now. Oh yeah, and I've published, I don't know, about 50 books. It's brilliant.
Yes, absolutely. Were you kind of influenced? Who was the guy who did Hunter S. Thompson's kind of illustration?
Oh God, Ralph Steadman.
Were you influenced by Ralph?
I so was. So luckily, and this is a big deal for me, actually. I really am. I think Ralph Steadman's brilliant. I think his line work and his colour work is insane.
What about Robert Crumb?
Crumb is problematic. I love his. I love lots of his work. I'm not so keen on his worldview, and some of his work is absolutely dreadful. But one thing I do love about him is the fact that he produces loads of work.
He does.
I definitely suck that in. The thing I love about Ralph Steadman, 2 things actually. Again, when I was at primary school, if we're talking visual arts, for some reason, we were taken to a Ralph Steadman exhibition. No, it was just after he'd done the Pink Floyd stuff. So that was like 77, wasn't it?
Right, yes.
In the second year of the grammar school. So we went on a trip, wherever it was, to London. That was a big deal. And yeah, it was a Ralph Steadman exhibition. And I could not believe it. It was like proper grown up and frightening.
Yes.
I was drawing Mickey Mouse. You know, that was the kind of drawings I was doing at the time. Very good Mickey Mouse, but Mickey Mouse, as it were.
Yes.
Suddenly the idea that you could kind of just draw and, whoa, literally the mark making is frightening.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, he was a big influence on me visually, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, when did you decide to do another album? This is London 1966. When did that sort of idea?
That was a good, I think, 4 or 5 years after pro-war. So that was, I can't even remember what the record label was. It North South, the record label?
Oh, Burning Shed.
Oh, yeah. So we signed to several labels, that's for sure. South, that's right. They had the rights to put the album out, but the single we did, the very first thing we did for them, sold so badly. I think they sold like 2 copies, genuinely 2 copies of the single. They said, oh, no, you can have the album back. We'll just... So yeah, Burning Shed is the local, isn't it? They're Norwich-based, really nice people. They said, yeah, we'll put it out. And they did, and it's great. And you can get electronic versions, but I think they still have some kind of CD copies, that real. Again, that was essentially just Globo working when we weren't working on anything.
Right.
So when Globo was working on something, there was a whole bunch of projects. One was called Glisten, which was amazing. A woman called Kazumi Kato, Japanese singer. We were essentially her backing band, and I loved that. I actually listened to it this afternoon. That was when we were doing stuff. Paul and Mark tried to become a girl band. So we had 3, yeah.
Fluidity at its height.
Absolutely. We had 3 kind of session musicians coming in, and they were brilliant. We recorded a whole bunch of stuff with them, did some kind of touring with them, but it didn't lead anywhere. So in the days we weren't working on those kind of projects, that's when that second album came out. in an afternoon you'd kind of throw something in, and then a couple of weeks later you'd throw the next kind of layer on that song. It was a real kind of slow burn project.
But was that the last time you'd recorded an album together?
You know, I think it is. No, actually, the Co-Muse one, the Fall cover, I think was after that one. I could be wrong. I'd have to look at my timeline.
I think it's actually, it seems to all be happening for you in 2008.
Yeah, now that would make sense.
And is that the kind of last time, apart from various other little?
Yeah. I mean, essentially at that point, things start. I mean, it was all interesting to that point, but then things start to get interesting. So Mark becomes an author. So rather than a bass player and a synth programmer, suddenly Mark Wonham, he's an author, and he's got like proper representation, and he puts a couple of novels out, and that's brilliant. And Paul becomes a filmmaker, and I become this kind of illustrator, and it gets slightly complex, obviously, because we also put out as a collective, the three of us and the guy that used to manage Globo, a guy called Push, Chris Dawes, I don't know if you know him. He was the editor of the NME.
The name's familiar, but yes.
The editor of the dance section of the NME. He also put out a couple of magazines. Certainly the famous one was called Mondo, and that was famous because Paul and I were featured artists, like visual artists, in this kind of lads mag.
Right.
And we were commissioned every month to produce a bit of art.
Nice.
Brilliant. Endless fun. So suddenly that's Push and Mark, become all really interested in writing and publishing. So kind of making music kind of falls down a bit for them because, oh my God, suddenly now they're the publishers of Electronic Sound, the magazine.
Oh, the magazine, right. It all makes sense.
That is Mark, the bass player in Basti and the programmer in Globo. He's now the owner of Electronic Sound. So.
Oh, well, that all makes vague sense because vaguely.
I love it when it comes together.
Because this guy who was an American dude, he came to the UEA. He's got a picture of that guy that you just push in this one. I think that's kind of him. I'm not sure.
I could well be. Yeah.
So he said that he was at the UEA at the same time that he was from America. But then he collected all this stuff and he's put it in a book which came out last year. And he mentions that chap as going on to do the magazine.
Right. Yeah. So they had at that point they were living in London. They were proper journalists and authors. Mark was flying all around the world and doing interviews with people. They were having a great time. I was a consultant for Norfolk and Suffolk County Councils, going around and helping people develop their IT skills and their marketing and branding.
God, that's very handy.
No, and again, suddenly it all comes back together. So Mark, obviously publisher, working in the kind of music industry. Paul, proper filmmaker now. Me, doing all my kind of books and all my kind of content creation. Suddenly, and also Mark lives. I can literally see his house if I look out the window. And Paul lives just a couple of roads up that way. So we're all still really close. I was working with Paul this morning, in fact, on a kind of teaching thing. We're all really close. We're still really interested in making work. But again, as kind of older people, it's about, maybe Friday get together and do some stuff. It's that kind of scheduling.
Yes. Well, actually, I did an interview with a member of It's Immaterial, and him and his co-worker, they'd had Friday together as Friday Fun Days. So that's what they would do every Friday. They would just get together and do whatever, which might not be much, but they would hang out together on a Friday. And yes, that's...
And again, I think it's crucial. One of the things I was talking about this morning, so this morning I did this teaching mentoring thing, And we talked a lot about the crucial nature of having people. So now I'm at this point where kind of creatively, I'm loving producing my own music. I'm loving producing my own books and paintings and drawings. But even so, I need to bounce those off other people.
Yes.
Just because I'm loving it doesn't mean to say I should, put it out or something. So my friends and compatriots' roles is to kind of rein me in a little bit now, which is weird. Because in the past, my role was to kind of just help them get stuff out. Now their role is to kind of maybe help me not throw everything out straight away.
Right.
It's fun.
Interesting times.
Yeah, your kind of roles shump around a bit.
Yes. Well, that's yes. It's kind of fascinating. I didn't realise there was such a sort of afterlife, or even yes, after your musical bands. Actually, it was.
But it also totally makes sense if you were part of, like you say, the kind of 1980s rock world. Either you're going to become, and I don't mean this in a pejorative sense. When you drop out of that, maybe you become an insurance salesman and you never do anything other than insurance salesman ever again. But if you do, I think what we did was developed a creative kind of process. And then the real question is, what do you do with that? What's the form that it takes? It could be books this year. It could be films the year after. It could be web stuff the year after that. It could be theatre or dance the year after that. But once you've made contacts with people that put on gigs, those people then put on shows. Those people then, does that make sense?
Yes, well, absolutely. Yes, because it's interesting, having done so many of these interviews, what people go on to, and it's almost like there's a few members of bands were also looking at the exit quite soon. They were thinking, yeah, this isn't going to make any money, so I need to sort of work out, do I sort of go towards engineering, do I go towards sound work, do I go towards production? They were sort of looking at other ways of what happens when the band finishes, because as you realize, most people finish because of a dynamic but also a complete lack of money happening in their lives.
Well, we need healthcare. Your hip is going to go, and you need.
So it's it's kind of one of those classic ones. So what's your plan then for the next period? Because obviously it sounds like you've still very much got all these ideas, and the sort of collective band members have also got all these ideas. I mean,
oh god, yeah.
Have you got some sort of idea of what's going to happen in the next couple of years?
Well, definitely me. This is so weird. I am on fire. I'm producing so much material. It's such a shame that COVID happened for many reasons. Obviously, my heart goes out to anyone that was kind of badly affected by it. Just to let you know, and everyone else who's listening, I did have COVID at the very start in March 2020. I had it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like 18, 19 months ago. And I haven't been able to sing since. So for 19 months, I've got, I think 9, 10 albums where I'm literally a singer-songwriter. I'm writing songs and they're heartbreakingly beautiful. And I've got this lovely voice. And then, bang, I catch COVID and my voice just, you can probably hear it's going now, actually.
Bloody hell.
I literally cannot sing. So that's fine because, people have died or they've been really seriously hurt. My lungs are fine. I've got no scarring. My kidneys are working fine. But my sinuses and my throat for 19 months have been atrocious. Actually, for the last couple of weeks, it's not been too bad. So I was speaking a lot this morning, and I'm speaking a lot now, and I'm surprised that it's held up this long, actually.
Bloody hell! I didn't realise it affected the vocal so much.
Oh god! Well, long COVID is, it's very complex, and we don't know what it does. Certainly, they talk about brain fog. So. I take lots of roles in our collective. I am an accountant.
Was that with the AAT? Did you get your
Yeah, well, I'm really interested in spreadsheets. I'm good with money and managing that stuff.
Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah. I am aware that my brain isn't as sharp as it was before 2020.
Oh.
And that's the brain fog thing. I'm really aware that my voice just isn't what it was. And actually, I'm selling, because I'm like this, if I can never sing again, I'm selling a collection of my singer-songwriter albums. You can buy them all in one blob, which I think is quite funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's only this past couple of weeks where I've been thinking, oh, maybe I could try singing again. But no, sorry, the reason I'm talking about the COVID thing, pre-COVID, two things happened, and I will shut up fairly soon because I'm aware.
No, it's fine.
The two things happened. Firstly, I went to my first ever book fair. If you know me, which I feel you know me a bit,
yes,
you can see that I would despise the idea of sitting behind a table with a bunch of people coming up and just, I loved it. I'm such an idiot. All these years I thought I wouldn't like this thing. So my wife's from Newcastle, and there's a brilliant book fair. I was invited to it because they knew my work from the MA stuff that I published, actually. It was a self-publishing fair. I got to the Baltic. I don't know if you know the Baltic Gallery in Newcastle. It's brilliant. Mm-hmm. And they literally came out to the car park and kind of helped me carry my books up. And they brought me the free coffee. And here's the biscuits, Steve.
That's amazing.
Here's your table. And it was all laid out. And I laid my books out. And it's brilliant. I did not realise how exciting it was talking to other people about your books and why you made them, and then taking their money and giving them the book.
Oh my God, this is it.
Yeah, I so loved it. The other thing, I've been just before lockdown, I started to have this thing. So I used to love performing as part of a group, but I'm actually quite kind of shy. I think that's why I took the roles in the bands that I did. Oh my God, as solo performer, I love it. And when I'm performing, what I've been doing is working at exhibition launches, and so very kind of free jazz, moving around the venue, making work responding to the audience and the art that's there. I love it so much. So if COVID hadn't have happened, I think I would have been by now much more out in the world.
Yeah.
Because COVID's happened, I've been sitting in my various studios around Norwich, kind of literally gazing at my navel as I'm kind of playing all this work. For me, the next few years, I'm super happy if it just continues. If I just make work, I'll be happy. I would be incredibly happy if COVID just kind of let us make work and be kind of face-to-face making it.
Yes.
That would make me super happy. What I would really like is for Globo to become more of a producer again. Because the work that the three of us individually seem to be working on, it seems like a real kind of simpatico. We should be able to work together. Paul should be making films for us, and I should be producing kind of soundtracks for those. Yes. And Mark should be writing words for us, and we should collectively be packaging those things up into shows, into boxes of material, into albums when we can get vinyl again. So yeah, more. That's all I want. Just more.
Yes, well, God, it's a shame that COVID happened and Brexit. But never mind. Yeah, this is tricky, isn't it? But it does sound like the three of you have had probably the longest relationship that anybody's ever had in the creative industries.
Yes, I think we've been, well, firstly, we've been incredibly lucky. And secondly, I think they are both really good. Like, unquestionably, they're really good. And I'll flip it back. I'm doing my hands now.
Yes.
I think I'm really good as well. And I think it doesn't bother Paul that Mark is really good. You know, that kind of ego thing doesn't happen. Mark isn't worried that I'm really good. And also, we're quite, and I mean this in a good way, quite childish. We do have loads of arguments. They particularly argue quite a lot creatively. Don't do this. Yes, I will do this. Don't do this. Yes, I will do this. And I think that's a really positive thing. So long as you know the other person's just genuinely good, yeah, why not argue it? It brings a bit of spice to it.
So when you look at the work that you did with both bands, which is the particular sort of moment or track that you think, when you listen back to it, you think, yeah, that was absolutely, we were really on fire, either Basti or Globo?
I think this is true of all bands. I think you hit at this kind of sweet spot where you lose your influences and where you're not tired or chasing something else. For me, Basti was absolutely at its finest when we were Basti. There was a grim point, and luckily it was never recorded, where because we were in Manchester, we were wearing kind of baggy shorts, and we had kind of those short shirts with hoodies on.
Beautiful.
Yeah, but it wasn't us. It was us pretending we were a bit Mancunian. And I think with Globo, there was a period where we were just Globo. We weren't trying to be an electronic band. We did loads of touring with Jack Danger's Meat Beat Manifesto,
Yes.
but we weren't trying to be him. We actually did loads of work with him as well, but we weren't trying to be him. And we hadn't got tired of being kind of dance creatives. I think the real problem is when you're not quite yourself, so you're more trying to find out who you are, or when you've become tired of yourself. And I think that's true of every band. There's this sweet spot when they're just who they are. That's all I'll say.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because I think, I don't know, there's a few artists I can remember who were sort of, from one decade, you know, would say quite big, influential. And the next decade they go into, I'm thinking of quite a few people from the 70s, their 80s work is like, oh, that's not good, is it? You know, that's really, you know, and they were trying to get the sort of the producer of the time. They were trying to almost listen to some other band and go, shall we have some of that? And it's like, no.
Yeah, you're chasing this.
Yes.
We were never going to be a good Mancunian band. We were always going to be a bad copy of the Stone Roses or whoever. And that's the last thing you want to be, Jesus.
No, yeah, because it's too obvious. It's just like, you know, some of those bands, especially the Britpop bands, you had a few and you thought, oh, this is quite good. And then the next wave comes in, you think, oh, this is where you kind of leave the party, isn't it? You think, yeah, that's,
yeah.
It's kind of, and the same with punk, you know, as well. And, you know, so.
And that's, it's only human. I don't hold that against anyone or myself when I do it.
No.
Yeah, looking back, you kind of think, oh, if only I could have broken my guitar at that point and played with the broken neck, so I wouldn't sound like a copy or a bad copy of Tony Iommi or whatever.
Good old Tony. Mentioned in a half man, half biscuit track, isn't he? Tony Iommi. So look, if you could have said something to your 16-year-old self starting out in that kind of world back in King's Lynn before you got to Yarmouth, I mean, if there was something you could have whispered in their ear, or two things, what would it be? What sort of worldly advice would you have given them, even if they would have ignored you and said, yeah, whatever, granddad?
They would totally have ignored me. Well, firstly, I am a granddad. I'm so pleased you called me granddad. Best thing I've ever done. He would have ignored me, the 16-year-old. I would have said, firstly, work harder. My memory of myself as a kid is that I was incredibly lazy. Like I really enjoyed everything, and I was pretty clever, so I didn't have to work. I think I mentioned when I did A-levels, most people do 3 A-levels. I did 2, and the 2 I chose to do was art and archaeology. The 2 easiest subjects literally in the world. And archaeology I was slightly disappointed in because I thought Raiders of the Lost Ark had just came out. So I imagined archaeology was going to be like that.
Yes. And
it was doing some field walking in Tilney All Saints for 2 years. But, you know.
You got an A. Did you get an A?
No, I got 2 grade E's. I really was lazy.
Gee, that was lazy.
Yeah, no, I know. So the idea that suddenly I became like going to university and I've got my first and I got my kind of master's, I'm actually quite pleased about that in a kind of facetious way. But no, I think the big deal is I would say to my younger self, just work harder, mate. You can do amazing stuff if you just do it. And secondly, don't wait. I think that's the other thing that young people can really fall into the trap of, waiting to become a brilliant guitarist before they tell people they're guitarists. Just do it. You don't have to write your magnum opus before you pretend you're an author.
No.
Hey, you're an author. Write some stuff. What the hell?
Yes. Well, I suppose it's the imposter syndrome, isn't it? Sometimes people can get quite insecure about, can I call myself this or can I just say that?
Yeah. Again, I've got literally no time for that. Just get on with it.
Yes.
I totally kind of empathise if you're feeling you don't deserve it, but you're wrong. You do. If you want to be an author, you be an author.
Get in with the creative. I mean, speaking to a few people, from, like talking about their kind of world, because they would often say, I wish we were nicer to other bands. We were sort of a bit competitive. And sometimes I just wish we'd been a bit friendlier. And looking back, they feel a bit embarrassed thinking, God, they must have thought we were such. Did you sort of have a good attitude to this, musical world? Or were you also a little bit like, oh no, we mustn't talk to
Can I be bold? I'm going to be brutally honest with you. Basti was essentially awful. We did not like, and we were not liked by anyone locally. And I think we as a collective revelled in that. That was a real creative thing for us. I think if we were too friendly with, kind of local people, maybe this was just us, maybe we weren't taking it seriously enough. And again, that's being young and angry. You have to be a little bit angry at something.
Mm.
I think the flip side of that at that point, I was still incredibly shy and I didn't like speaking to people. So not only was I kind of a little bit, oh no, we shouldn't be friends with people because that's not what we should be doing, but also I was probably too nervous to make friends with people.
Yes, and that's kind of quite common as well. Yeah,
totally. It totally makes sense that there's a level of narcissism in wanting to be a rock guitarist, but there's also a level of insecurity in needing to be a rock guitarist. I'm totally aware of that.
Yes.
That I think literally goes back to telling your 16-year-old self just to get over it, get on with it, make work, and be nice, be friends with people. Because the flip side, while we were being horrible as Basti, we were community musicians working in hospitals and prisons, encouraging people to kind of make music and make connections. And we were very kind of left-wing, and we helped the Venue Campaign get the Waterfront running. We were very engaged, just not with other musicians, which is quite funny.
Yes, a bit like Flashdance, but without the welding. But what did we like a bit of welding? But what happened? Yeah. What did your parents and dad and brother think of your musical and life journey?
I think they had no opinion on it. There was a lovely family barbecue when one of my cousins came up and said, "How's the shop going?" And I said, "What?" He said, "This shop you've got where you sell computers." My mum had just lied. She said that I owned a shop that sold computers because she couldn't understand what it was that I did to make money.
Right.
Which I think is brilliant.
It's good.
She
Mums
took
do.
my advice as a 16-year-old. She didn't know what I was doing, so she just got on with it and made up something that her son was doing.
Yeah.
I think my dad was not interested because I wasn't playing country and western. He was that was the thing that he listened to. Brilliantly, there was a period, because I'm very accepting of stuff, there was a period where I played lots of country and western. But he wasn't interested in that by that point anyway. So yeah.
Does he know the story of you being taken to not Great Yarmouth, Cromer, and seeing Bert Jansch? Not Bert
No,
Jansch.
unfortunately, he passed away. Well, in the last half of my MA, I became his kind of carer. So I was doing this kind of stuff while I was looking after Dad as he was in that process of dying. And brilliantly, at the very end of the MA, when I was doing all my kind of thesis and blah, blah, putting on the final shows, working on the final project, I was actually selling his house and going through all his stuff and chucking it out. So that was a pretty grim period.
Jesus, that is grim. Who's there? There was an amazing book I've got, which is, I must just see, you must have got it actually. Jesus, I can't believe I found it so quickly.
It's a book.
No, have you got that one?
Do you know I have not? But I do. One? Yeah, I do know about it, so I know what it is.
Oh, fuck, it makes you cry. Jesus.
Yeah, no, well, again, from a student of communication design, all stuff is designed to get a story, a narrative, to produce a response. Yes. And yeah, that is a pretty grim story.
Well, it's beautiful and it's life. It is life. It's nothing unusual, but my God, it does pull your heartstrings. And it's, you know, I don't think...
That is literally what I said about my final project. I'm not saying anything. That's the book I produced as part of my final project. That is my father.
Right.
The project was called Transitions, moving from one state to another. When I was talking about me moving from being a kid, there's a drawing of me as a baby sitting on his shoulders. And then I kind of wipe out that picture and I become an old man with my granddaughter. So it's the same piece of paper. I just keep wiping out the picture and the picture keeps developing. They look great. But I said in my actual proposal, it's nothing unusual. It's nothing dramatic. It's a story that everybody goes through.
My God, I think you'd love that
book.
It's
my story, so I'm going to put it into this bloody book and you're going to buy a copy and it'll be beautiful. Raymond felt the same way. It's dull. It's a dull story that everybody hopefully kind of goes through. It was also one of the best and most precious moments of my life to be with him at that period, where you can kind of give your father his last ice cream. You're kind of sharing that moment with him. You can give him his last fish and chips. This fish is a bit dry. Yes, it is, Dad, but it's the last fish and chips you're ever going to have.
Christ.
And to be with him as he took his last breath and his kind of pulse went, it was an absolute privilege. Really difficult, but an absolute privilege. Again, it's kind of those things that you take with you. And I'd say to my 16-year-old self, pay attention. And yeah, make notes and hopefully unobtrusively take photographs and recordings and write music about. Because if you don't, much like Blade Runner, they're just tears in rain, all those moments go.
Yes, oh God, I know. Life, Jesus, as Lemmy said, you just got to keep in it, haven't you? But
yes.
It is.
Oh, and I've saw Motorhead so many times. They were a real kind of, you know, Lemmy worked in Anglian Canners, the King's Lynn canning factory.
I remember someone mentioning this is something to do with his white boots that he used to like to wear, that it was to do with him having boots in the factory, yes. I didn't know that story, actually. I've heard a lot of people over the years, you know, who I've interviewed who, especially from London in that sort of 70s, 80s, knew Lemmy because he just was there.
Yeah,
everywhere.
again, you're part of a scene. Of course, you kind of know.
Every pub and every venue and club, Lemmy sort of was about. So, blimey. So he was in King's Lynn, was he?
Yeah, apparently. It's an apocryphal story. I choose to believe it.
Yeah, well, it might
I
have
have
happened.
to Google it now.
Well, I know he did the Rockin' Vickers, then he was Jimi Hendrix kind of roadie, and then he was kind of War Hawkwind. So, I don't know. It might have been a weekend. He didn't have much time, though, did he? He didn't
He
have
had
much
lots
time
of
to get
food,
to King's
though.
Lynn. There is a problem with that story, isn't there?
He had lots of food because he worked at Anglicanners.
He
He could
did.
go with packets of.
He wasn't famous for eating though, was he?
No, he was not a fat chap, that's for sure.
He his diet was a bit sort of basic, really. So and he loved playing on the game machine, didn't he? It's like that's his thing. Everyone always said, "Oh, you'd go to this pub and there was Lemmy in the corner," but
Yeah.
he never broke his concentration because he would really swear at you. So yeah, you just went, "Oh, don't say anything,"
He's done well though.
Oh, he did well, didn't he? Dear old Lemmy. Yeah. Anyway, look, I'll let you go. But thanks so much. If you want, I can always, when I do this, I can send you the link and then you can always put it up on your social media
I
platform.
would love that. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then people can go, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Or not.
Or skip. When's he going to stop talking and let David speak? I would also say one of my pals, Steve Weissman, who lives in Hollywood, the day after you first emailed me, he emailed me to say, I've just heard a brilliant interview, a brilliant podcast with a guy in your area. It's David, this C86 show. I was so pleased. I wrote straight back and said, yeah, he's just emailed me. I might be doing
So what was the interview that he listened to?
I think he listened to a bunch of them. So Steve Weissman is a cartoonist. I think he's brilliant. I also count him as one of my friends. We've only ever met once in real life. And that was brilliant. Sometimes you meet people and they're a disappointment. Sometimes you meet people and you just connect with them. I thought he was a lovely bloke. But I love the fact that somebody from a completely different world
that was very weird.
is listening to your podcast, tells me that he's listening to your podcast at the same time that we're starting to connect and about to do an interview.
Yes, that is a bit bizarre, isn't it? Because I kind of realised in this one little room the other day, there was some, I don't know, I can't quite believe this is true, but Podbean said, congratulations, you've done 600. And that was quite a while ago. And I was thinking, so this one little room has had so many interviews from people around the world. It's unbelievable, really.
Fantastic. You do it. You're my 16-year-old self. Work hard and just do it.
Yes, well, it's like, I keep on, going, oh yes, this is very exciting. It is great. It's like, oh my God, that person, I must, he played bass. I don't know. I won't go on about it, but there's been some amazing kind of moments. But this has been amazing as well. So look, it's been lovely. And look, yeah, like I said, I'll send you the link, and then you can see what people say. But hopefully, Steve Weissman will listen to it and go, oh no.
I'll force him to now. Yeah,
I know that'll get him, won't it? Anyway, look, I'll let you go, but thanks again for your time. This has been amazing. I hope you recover from your COVID experience.
Well, yeah, I've got my fingers crossed. Like I say, in the last couple of weeks is the first time that I haven't had awful sore throats. So I've got my fingers crossed.
You've turned the corner, yeah. Well, I'm an asthmatic, and I'm just kind of thinking, a couple of weeks' time, although, I don't want to wish the summer away. It's like, I think it will change with the pollen and stuff, and it'll be like, oh yes, I've got most of my lungs, but I kind of know that there's a percentage that isn't quite happening, and it's like, right, I'll just not go too quickly here, but eventually it'll be like, oh yes, I can move a bit quicker now. And
I'm saying is when so in that kind of couple of weeks when I was never really bad. I've spoken to people who were really bad, and I haven't spoken to people obviously because they've died. So I know I didn't have it too bad. But because I'm me, I kept a diary every day. And there's this one, so I was kind of, worried about certain stuff. Oh, that's not very good. I won't go into my symptoms, but gosh, that's not very good. But there was one thing reading back a few months after I'd kind of recovered from it. But at the time, I realised I was so frightened that I didn't process it. But there's this one little line where I say, "Oh, I've realised I can only breathe in for 2.5 seconds." And then it stops. You went, "Ugh." And then it stopped. It wasn't painful. And I was just kind of saying, "Oh, that's interesting." Afterwards, as I was kind of reading it, I realised I can breathe in for nearly 18 seconds. So my lung capacity had literally, and at that point you're thinking, okay, if it goes down to 2 seconds, is that so small you can't get up and down the stairs anymore? 1.5 seconds, is that when you need to quit? You know, you kind of, your world is getting really small. So I'm not saying anything. I'm saying, yeah, you need to be really comfortable before you even think about the possibility of getting that.
Yeah, well, I realised, having had this since the age of 4, and obviously I was the only kid at school, so hurrah for that. But I just realised most people don't know what it's like not to be able to breathe, because you kind of think, well, you just breathe, but you go, no, breathing's like,
No, it
and
was.
you go, Dad, can we quickly go to the hospital? It's like,
Yeah. Give me my thing. Do something.
Yeah, I know. When you can't, when you can't breathe, you think, actually, this is getting real. I'm now on my knees and I'm praying to God. That's kind of when things are getting a bit. So I think when people go, it's like, you don't know what it's like not to breathe.
I'm waggling my finger. Oh, no, you take this seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's kind of one of those. Yeah, because like this summer, I did my peak flow and it was like, oh yeah, it has just dropped a percentage. And then you think that is, probably 20%. So I'm not that surprised. But then I know the figures where it's like, that's when it's kind of gets critical and you have to go, I'm going to go to the doctors today just to sort of get some steroids, I think. Because it's that kind of like the tipping point. You think I can hold it at that percent, that number, but that next number down is I need to go, really. I can't do that whole, my God, I can't breathe, because yes, Jesus, it's horrendous. But it's it makes you appreciate that moment where you think, God, I can breathe, and my nose isn't blocked, and everything's okay. I'm all right. But it's a weird one when your body sort of starts to collapse on you,
And there will end the.
Yes, I know they were weird. But anyway, look, we're in our 50s and we're rocking, so that's the main thing.
We are doing bloody well.
Well, that's what I think. In the circumstances, you got to keep smiling, haven't you? But anyway, look, take care and thanks a lot. And I'll keep in touch.
Yeah, and also I would say, in the future, hopefully we'll bump into each other.
Yes, I know. Well, there you go.
I walk around town. Love to meet up at some point.
Let's rock.
We're both comfortable.
We're comfortable. We can. Yes, I know. I'll be wearing a mask for years. Actually, I quite like the mask thing. Actually,
get me started. I think it's really cute.
I think they're great, and you don't feel embarrassed if you see someone you don't want to talk to anymore because you just think, I've got a mask. They're not quite sure, do they?
Yeah. Well, they can't see the shapes that my mouth is making.
Yes. Well, they're thinking, you do that thing. I think David Bowie used to do it in New York, where he'd walk around with this kind of boring outfit and a boring paper, and when people looked at him, he wouldn't just, it was like, no, that can't be David Bowie, can it? But it was like, yes, it was probably, So the mask is the same thing. That's what I think, is that if someone goes, oh, and you don't respond back, they go, oh no, I thought that was going to be David, but it's not, is it? It's brilliant. You can go around the supermarket quite quickly now. So there you go. Anyway, look, I must go. Look, and thanks. Thanks again. That's been great. But
I really enjoyed it. Hopefully it was useful. And
it's been brilliant. I'm amazed. I mean, there you go. It's good stuff. But look, thanks again, and take care of yourself.
Brilliant. Good night.
Bye-bye. Yeah. And that, dear listener, is showbiz. And that's also how not to end a phone call or conversation. But I love to leave them in because they're quite fumbly, and I quite like that in that self-conscious, nerdy way. But a massive thank you to Steve Appleton to give me the time for that interview. This, though, has been the C86 Show. I'm David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Do C86 Show. Keep it positive and nice. Otherwise, don't bother. Seriously. And also, if you're interested, you might be, you all these have been archived, these interviews, and they all go on literally for hours. But if you're remotely interested, I don't care if you are or not really, you can find them on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, and yes, any indie bands from the 80s especially, and a bit of a obsession with David Bowie. So there's various people who work with David Bowie, which have been, some of them are brilliant. And I'm not being biased either. Anyway, look, good night. Have a great week.